Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for coming and joining us at the Recovery Clinic live on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 11 a.m. Your host, Chris Dickey and Jimmy McGill, coming to you, bringing you recovery discussions to keep you engaged during this pandemic. Real quick, if you haven't liked or followed our page, please do that. We plan to continue doing these, and we want to bring you opportunities to stay engaged. And Jimmy and I have been talking about there's no excuses right now for you to continue to stay on an island of one of struggle, of staying in negativity, and anything that is difficult that requires more than one person to tackle. And so we created the Recovery Clinic for you to come in here and be a part of some really great engaging discussions. And today we have a great show. It's one of my favorite people in the world is going to join us, and Jimmy is going to talk about him for a second and introduce him, bring him up in the bubble.
Absolutely. And so, as always, remember, folks, we are a public talk show that is recorded. So be cautious and conscious of what you type in the comments. They will be there forever. So big shout out to the Arkansas State Drug Director's Office for making this possible. Thank you for all the supporters and the people who believed in recovering people and gave us this platform to keep us connected. And so, yeah, thank you. We got a great show today. A lot of you, if you're in Arkansas, and well, it doesn't really matter where you're at, we've got Joseph Hogan Sanchez on here today, who is definitely a personal friend of mine. He has mentored me along my way and my journey. He has literally been training peer recovery specialists since 2009. He's a program director for Faces and Voices of Recovery, which is a national advocacy movement. The dude has trained hundreds of peer specialists, right? Like, he's built up advocates everywhere. Not just that, what he did for me was leadership development, Chris. He literally came to Arkansas and helped us prepare to be better leaders. Like, he set in dozens of states, built this leadership stuff up so that what comes next? What about the next generation of leaders?
One of the things I love about Joseph is it's easy for someone to come into a state, not know anybody, give a real quick talk about what you need to be doing, and then leave. And that's a lot of the way some organizations treat things. Joseph has really invested in our state to really help shape what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And has came back and forth. Bye, Chris. We didn't want to hang out with you anyway. I mean, that really just looked like some institutional stuff. Did you really just go slide something under a door? We're not living like that anymore, bro. So, yeah, big shout out to Joseph. And so, without any further ado, I'm going to bring him on the screen. But first, please share the video if you're watching it. We want to carry a message of hope that people can and do recover everywhere, regardless of what you're doing or how long you've been doing it. There's hope. And so share the video. Help us make that possible. And Joseph will be with us in 2, 1. Joseph!
Hey! Hello, everyone.
Where are you at right now, Joseph?
I am live here in Austin, Texas, in my quiet little corner of the house, and just doing the deal, quarantining like the rest of the nation.
Are you keeping Austin weird?
Absolutely.
For those of you who might not know, there's always been this battle between Portland, Oregon, and Austin, Texas, about who keeps the city weirdest, or something like that, right?
Yeah, and we definitely keep it weird here. Absolutely. So during this time of quarantine, at least in a few different neighborhoods, we have some folks dressed up in their dinosaur costumes and walking their dogs or just going for a walk. Yesterday being the 4th of May, we had some folks dressed up in their Star Wars gear. It was great.
So yesterday was the 5th. It was Taco Tuesday.
Wow. And see, all this time it's starting to merge together. Let
Oh
us
no,
out already.
it's just a continual. There really isn't time right now. It's just a
No.
continual conveyor belt of moments that
Yeah.
are really not tied to anything.
I have to check the collar to see what day it is because I label my shirts. I don't label my shirts, but that would be funny.
Wow.
So
So
your state was under a stay-at-home order or something like that, and now you're open.
Yeah, that's Texas is strategically reopening the state, and so we've had patio restaurants opening at a percentage. I think from some of my reading, hair salons and barber shops will be opening if they're not open today. And I've done a couple attempts at cutting my own hair, and hey, it's been okay. It's been okay. My husband would disagree. Usually, the back of my head is where I have the most trouble, but I don't see it, and you don't see it. So hey, works
Right.
out.
So tell me, are you able to meet face to face in recovery fellowships and things of that nature?
I think that there are some folks that have been, meeting up, but they have a lot of stuff put into place, 10 people at a time, the regular 6 feet apart, masks, cleaning up, like heavy duty cleaning up, and hand sanitizers. But for a good majority of the recovery community, it's been virtual. So Zoom life, it has been a reality for us.
That's right. Jimmy and I were talking about if it's true that connection is the opposite or inverse of addiction, it seems like the internet is our friend right now to
Yeah.
find.
yeah. So what's really amazing to me, Chris, is that within 48 hours of this pandemic, we literally, the recovery community at a global level, no matter what your pathway was, everything had went virtual. Like that's that going to any length to be able to maintain my recovery. Like it's cool to see that amount of self determination in recovery people to where they want to maintain what we've got so bad that we digitalized. Did I say that right? Digitalized? Nailed it almost.
Yeah, we may look that one up later. Joseph, tell me about, because over here in Arkansas and what I'm seeing as a trend in the United States, talk to me about the concerns that you're seeing in the recovery community with people really struggling, because people with mental health challenges and substance use disorder challenges, that is a real problem right now. It's kind of like we have two pandemics, right? Two public health crises.
Yeah. It has been really difficult for a lot of us that may not consider, our ability to use technology or have technology as a privilege. There are members of the community that are completely disconnected. They don't have any technology like a laptop or a cell phone to stay connected. And so how does one receive services? How does one go out to even, go to the doctor's office? Usually now I know I have to set up an appointment ahead of time, fill out a screening, and, in order to go see my regular doctor. But, it has been, quite difficult, and we are seeing a lot of innovative ways and approaches to that. My husband, meets up with his friend. They have lunch and they order through the drive-through, and they sit and park, and they talk on the phone, from car to car. So it's just kind of thinking about, how to think outside the box around that.
Yeah.
What I know about the recovery community is we're resilient, and I truly believe that from this, not only providers, but the community will grow stronger. But we also have to look out for those that may still be slipping through the cracks.
Yeah. Something that Chris and I've noticed a lot, like when you said, I think resiliency is an understatement of what you're seeing in people in recovery right now. Don't you think, Chris? Like
Yeah, I
we
mean,
have really stepped up when the services stopped. It was recovering people that put their lives on the line and volunteered, and of course with the medical professionals. Shout out to all the nurses and the frontline soldiers who are out there saving us right now. And recovery people did the same for our community.
yeah, I mean, the struggle is obviously different. I mean, I used to, have a tarp for a blanket in random garages that I'd find to stay warm at night. And even reflecting on that and comparing, it's mentally this quarantine and the way things are right now are really affecting me in my own personal recovery journey. And so I've got to I'm recovery with the volume up right now, right? And so really staying aware of my thoughts and what I'm thinking, what I'm doing, and so just had a confrontation with a family member and was able to work through that. And but part of that is because it's difficult. I'm overwhelmed sometimes, and so to talk to what Jimmy was talking about. And what you were touching on, Joseph, is there are people that may not have had a strong enough foundation to handle something like this. And what I used to do is to look for something that was familiar, and that's Jimmy said a whole bunch is the dope house isn't closed, but the meetings are. A lot of recovery centers are. And so, where are they going to go? Right. And so it's important for us to continue to throw that line out of support and saying, hey, we're here. But on the real, we're dealing in a lot of tragedies one after another, and there's going to be a big wave, and we're just seeing the beginning of it. And it's very painful. It's a lot to deal with. It's a lot to carry. Hugging parents that have lost a child and to an overdose that was completely preventable and senseless is very difficult to process.
Yeah. So what is, speaking of that, what is the overdose and the return to use rate look like in Texas right now? Because in Arkansas, in the last 30 days, our naloxone rate of administration has tripled, which tells us our overdose rates have tripled. And so, unfortunately, a lot of the people who survived and were the overdose was reversed with naloxone later had in the same month were death by suicide. And so that's really tragic. And so, are you seeing that in Texas?
I think it's definitely a little bit more difficult to see those numbers now because if somebody is in social isolation and they return to use and they do overdose, who's going to find them? And usually it takes a while to find folks. So there's a disadvantage to those disconnections. But I think that also too, being mindful across the board around, return to use and cases of suicidality, because that is definitely a thing. That is definitely a thing. So I think as a community and as service providers, really thinking about how or rethinking, our methods of outreach.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree totally. Chris, did you have something right there?
No, I was going to say, it's a great segue into some of the questions we had for you, Joseph, and Jimmy's got a few of them right in front of him.
I do, man. I am prepped and ready for this.
He's got them wrapped up like a little gifts and
Hey, listen, when you got Joseph Hogan Sanchez coming on your show, bro, you got to be prepared, because if not, Joseph's going to make you feel unprepared. You know? So, hey, I know we've got some of our viewers right now. They're chomping at the bit to know who you are. Shout out to my favorite parole officer, Mr. Harpo, who was on here a while ago. It's really cool to see that gap being bridged between law enforcement and recovery. And so I've also seen people say how much they love you, Joseph. But for the ones that are watching that don't, tell us a little bit about your personal recovery.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I started my recovery process in my hometown, El Paso, here in Texas. So it's a border town. And, with the help of my parents and the treatment providers there, I was able to, do the whole deal, detox. And about my third day in detox, a 12-step fellowship came out and carried a message, and I felt at home. So my recovery pathway is working a 12-step program, and I have been on that pathway since 2005. And from that work that I did on myself, thank you. From that work that I've done on myself, I've had the opportunity to work for the residential recovery center that assisted me in my recovery. A huge shout out to them, El Paso Alliance. They're doing some excellent work. And that's quite honestly, it's from them and leaders like Ben Bass out there that I learned about servant leadership and how to not only just come into my own as a leader, but also to help others as well. I've had the opportunity from that to become a trainer and actually really fall in love with training and just the facilitating change through that dynamic and making connections with people. So I've been doing that for quite some time. Like you'd mentioned earlier, I have trained peers. I've trained peers to train peers, helped to develop curriculum for peer recovery support. And through a lot of my work, someone called me a subject matter expert, and I was like, do you not know what I was doing today? So it's one of those occasions where, we really don't take the time to kind of pause and see how much we've grown. And so in that statement,
something about you, Joseph, where you've trained like 60,000 hours for this. So to put that in perspective, there's a book called, I think it's called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. And he talks about to become an expert in something, you have to focus 10,000 hours on something, a particular subject. So, I mean, you've got that in spades, right?
Well, I also think, being, having gone through the service system as well and having intimate knowledge of, what works, at least what worked for me. And also to having conversations and intentionally being present in those conversations to see, others' experience and hear others' experience and be able to translate that into the work that we do in way of peer recovery support services.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you point out that I can really relate to is, yes, I made my beginning in a 12-step community. And, I was in a bubble for a really long time. And so one of the most beautiful things about peer recovery is you're introduced to a whole new world of things that are going on. Recovery is a roomy, broad highway, and it's all inclusive. And so when what peer recovery did for me was pop that bubble that I was living in and really expand my mind to be aware of everything else that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, quite honestly, from those opportunities of getting to learn about what has been, different approaches to support recovery communities, I had the opportunity to meet folks from all across our nation, and more specifically get linked up to the organization that I work with now, Faces and Voices of Recovery. And 4 years ago, I was, coming close to 4 years, I was asked to join the team as the as part of the accreditation wing of Faces and Voices, and so it's been
a little bit about
wild
Faces
ride.
and Voices.
Yeah, Faces and Voices of Recovery is a national advocacy organization, and we provide technical assistance and training and support. And we're based out in DC, so perfectly positioned for advocating on Capitol Hill around issues that affect the community. We have 3 different programs, and one of them that is a membership association. It's the Association of Recovery Community Organizations, that we gather the information from those constituents and really advocate for changes at Capitol Hill. We're part of advocating for more dollars, more access, sometimes change in language or change in approach, and really trying to be grassroots in the sense that we get the information from the community, we feed that back up, but also too stuff that is coming down the pipeline from the federal government, making sure that our constituents know about that as well, and how to be active in their local communities.
So one of the things that we've heard as a major gap in the recovery community, if you will, is recovery housing.
Yeah.
So will you talk to us about, because really, the recovery housing, or even if it's accredited, even if it's licensed to do such, it's not covered by insurance. It's not, but we all know the research says that it's critical to someone's longevity and recovery. And so talk to us about what's going on maybe on Capitol Hill or anything like that we need to know about recovery housing. It's largely an unregulated industry. Anybody can open up a sober house.
Yeah, so I think that, SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, they identify some dimensions that, really, if we look at as folks in recovery, are core components of that, and that's health, home, purpose, and community. And home being that safe place, right? So I reflect back to my early recovery and what that looked like, and I needed to, if I had a bad day at work, I needed a safe place to go back to that wasn't surrounded by any kind of substances that I could use. And so when it comes to recovery residencies, they provide those environments, some more structured than others. And so we see this whole gambit of different types of recovery residencies that help to support that individual and help to not only provide that connection with other people on a similar path, but also to a safe place, a safe place to discover what life looks like in this new journey of recovery. And so what we do see nationally is, a way of really making sure that those recovery residencies, aren't turning into slumlords, so to speak, right? Yeah. We all have heard of those scary stories of some sober homes or recovery houses that they're piling folks into a room. And I don't necessarily think that's intentional, but I think it's we want to help out as people in recovery, and we're trying to figure out how to help out and help out the best way we know how. But I think with putting a level of standards into place just like they do with hospitals, right? They have hospitals. Hospitals have a level of standards that they have to meet so that they're providing excellent service, and they're looking after the care of those clients and those patients in those hospitals. I think that's a similar thing, and it has been put into place with the National Alliance of Recovery Residencies to really make sure that the people that go into those houses not only have that safe and comfortable environment, but truly safe when it, clearly labeled exit plans, and all the appropriate, functionalities of a home, hot water, fire extinguisher, and so on.
Yeah, Joe, so you talk about like there's 3 ingredients to a tragic situation. So you've got people in desperation, people in despair, families in despair. You've got an unregulated industry, and you've got a bad player. And so you get that. That's where these stories are coming out, and they're trading. It's nothing short of human trafficking. And so I think that's why the NARR is something to be supported. We need a governing body, at least, to someone to kind of provide guidance to and checks and balances.
Yeah. So, that's what my wife built her women's residence off of, was the National Alliance of Recovery Residences guidelines, because that's the only SAMHSA supported regulations that we have. But the state regulations are not existent. You don't have to have a license. And as long as it's really under 8 people, you don't even have to be zoned, and there's nothing that a city can do except for throw a fit. And so that's when it gets to what you're talking about, Chris, when they're stepping over holes in the floor, and you've got cockroaches, and hot water's not on, or the water tank's not big enough for 7 women or 7 men in a house. You see that. And as people in recovery, I think a lot of times my perception will be bent, and I won't see it like Joseph was just talking about. Like Joseph was talking about, we want to help out the most way that we can. And sometimes we find ourselves in a position, and those good intentions end up becoming bad moves, right? But I see it as you're really making money on the backs of people who are living with addiction, and it enrages me. Just saying. I get mad easy.
That's why I think that, as we progress and things that we can change, that we can actually enact all the way up to the Capitol, is getting it covered by insurance. That attracts regulation and governance to, if I have to have a license to pull a fish out of a pond, why not have a license to operate a recovery house that's housing people that come in on life support, that's part of a in some cases a treatment program, like the Florida model. So Joseph,
Chris,
over in Austin, you were talking about things, being, going in a cautious direction of opening things up. We're doing that too here in Arkansas. In fact, I think we just opened up barbershops today. I'm seeing people on social media talk about their experience and what they're doing with sanitation. So as we continue to find our footing in somewhat of bringing back some normalcy to our lives, talk to us about the future of Faces and Voices. Where are you guys going? What's the vision? What's the future?
Our future is to continue to support the statewide and local recovery community organizations, and ideally a goal of having a statewide recovery community organization in in all 50 states, and making sure that there's adequate and appropriate recovery support services out there, and how we can support them in that. So right now, we have an excellent project going on with the state of Florida, where they are having concentrated efforts in building out recovery community organizations. So we have partnering organizations that are helping us really identify new and emerging recovery community organizations, us helping to provide information and connection and mentorship to build out those recovery community organizations, and really finding that that more connection, statewide and nationally, to help support those organizations moving forward and those communities.
So building the infrastructure to support what's coming, and totally support that. Just real quick, Joseph, we've got a couple of new guests that are watching. Hello from New York. Hello from Vegas. Hello from San Antonio. That was where I was born, Bexar County. Bexar.
Yeah. So real quick, if you guys, let me plug us up real quick. If you just tuned into the show, thank you, Officer Tommy Norman, for sharing the video. We can always tell when you share it, Officer Norman, because we get several hundred new viewers. So thank you guys for tuning in. This is the recovery clinic. People in recovery are in a serious spot right now because of COVID-19. So this is our way of staying connected and not returning to drug or alcohol use. And so thanks for your support. If you haven't liked or followed the page, please go do so, and share the video. It may save someone's life that you know. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Chris. Where was you at?
Well, hello again from Vegas. Latoya, yay, Vegas in the building. I love how you say that, because that's, Elvis is pretty big out there. And so we don't want you to leave the building. So stay in with us. Rebecca, all the way from Des Moines, Iowa. Welcome. We're so glad you're here too. Joseph, let's talk about fear. Let's talk about, the early on in recovery versus where you're at now. Do you use the same techniques to get over your fears?
Yeah, I think that, and speaking about my early recovery, I see that one of my friends, Jason Wagner from San Antonio, he actually saw me when I first came into the recovery process, and shout out to you, Jason. Hey. I think that through the recovery process, through any recovery process, I would say step back and say through any life and betterment and wellness process, we learn how to process fear. And on any given day, I could, choose to use those tools to process fear or not. And as I've been in recovery for a while, the fears look different, and so the approach has been different.
Yeah.
First, for me, it is really identifying, what I am afraid of, and sometimes that's not pretty to look at. And I think that that's part of the courageous part, or courageous thing that we do in any type of betterment situation, is identifying what we're afraid of, and putting a name to it, sometimes a face to it, and going through a process of getting to a place of acceptance and knowing what I can do and I can't do, and being compassionate and caring and loving with myself on that. I think with our current national pandemic, fear does come up a lot.
Yeah.
And it can manifest in feelings like anxiety, and that can be debilitating and crippling, and it's this lack of connection that I can't reach through a computer and give Jimmy a hug,
and I want one. right now. You
No,
know.
Don't we all?
Ready to be greedy with it.
Yes, yeah. I'm a hug dealer. You know,
Yeah.
but Joseph, that's so true, and I cannot count the times that Chris and I have been in a conversation, and I just tell him, man, I've had COVID-19 7 times in a month. Like every time I sneeze, every time my fear will just it'll just inflate. You know what I mean? And without a solid way of knowing how to walk through that fear and combat that fear, I could very well be one of the statistics. Did I say that right? Did I nail that?
Yeah.
Statistics that have tripled because of the pandemic. I don't want to return to drug use, and fear will take me there.
Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely.
Hey, Miss Katie, it's so good to see you too. I hope the girls are well and you are staying sane. All the way from Boston, Mass. Ida, welcome. We're so glad you're here as well.
Yeah, and we got Zion, Illinois in here too. Tina, thank you for tuning in.
Let us know if you have any questions or topics that you want us to cover. We're talking with Joseph Sanchez, all the way from Austin.
Hogan Sanchez.
Okay, Hogan Sanchez.
You got to nail it. You got to say it all.
Gotta add it.
So, Joseph, you are very familiar, and you're actually kind of helping Arkansas get its first one up and going. So, can you talk to us about an RCO, a Recovery Community Organization? What is it, and why is it so important that every major city has one?
Recovery community organizations. To put it in a nutshell, and you all are both old enough to remember this, FUBU, that clothing line, for us, by us, right? When we talk about recovery and recovery support services, we do not want to have services provided for us or to us without us having some input in that. And so with recovery community organizations, they're grassroots, usually nonprofit organizations that provide peer recovery support services. So these are services developed, designed, delivered, evaluated, and by folks in recovery. And so usually the way we see recovery community organizations pop up is from need, right? As a community. Some communities are seeing some gaps in services, and usually the recovery community knows how to navigate those systems of care. And so coming together in a way to say, okay, what are we going to do to help fill in those gaps in services? What are we going to do to be a hub for resources, or a hub for information, or a hub for connection? And really coming together and formalizing a process that includes resource navigation by a person with lived experience who's there and done that, and creating an organization that really becomes a wealth of information in bringing the community together, and quite honestly, a integral part of a recovery-oriented system of care. Why is it important to have it in major cities? I think it's not only important to have it in major cities, but also in rural areas as well. We're looking at nationally some federal dollars coming down for organizations to really focus in on those rural areas, because especially now, it's really hard to reach folks. And so if you're in a rural area and you don't have any mutual aid support groups or 12-step groups in your area, a recovery community organization could provide peer recovery support services, peer-led groups, and just that connection.
So you're saying that if we have an RCO, then anybody can just drop in there, go in there and get free peer recovery support, regardless of their financial standing, regardless of the insurance, and they can actually learn like life skills there.
Yeah, absolutely. We see recovery community organizations providing life skills, job readiness skills. Some have like a food pantry component or clothing closet. I think like there are tons of different recovery community organizations really taking innovative approaches to providing support to their community, to their fellows.
So if you were in a rural area, like literally in the middle of the country, how would the people who were wanting to receive services get there? Because most people in early recovery or active addiction or moderation addiction, they don't really have vehicles. The majority of us don't have.
Walk.
Well, what if it's in Oak Grove and it's 100 miles out of walking distance?
Well, it's not going to be 100 miles, man. You're making up problems that don't exist.
Well, no, I was just actually thinking,
No, I
Chris
think it's
literally just bought a high school. Like the dude has got 337,000 buildings on all this land, and one of those could be easily converted into an RCO. But how would people get there to receive peer services?
like I totally hear what you're saying, but on the same end, and I know, and Joseph knows that I used to ride a bike that was a pink and purple Huffy, and the front wheel was like
wobbly.
Yeah. It was bent. I had to constantly pedal, otherwise I'd come to a complete stop. Yeah. And when I was done doing that, I walked to the places I wanted to go. I really was out for recovery. I was desperate for it. And so I would go to any lengths to get it. And so we can't forget that part of it. But yes, transportation and solutions to get people to the solutions that must. But I think there's a balance in order to meet in the middle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that, a part of finding out the need, and this is what recovery community organizations do well. Hi, Bonnie. I love you too. Is community assessment. So if we are for us biased, then we need to include the community in this process. The community is going to tell us what they need, what they want, and where to build out a recovery community organizations. So one magical word that we use all the time, included in my vocabulary, and if I don't say it at least once a day,
participatory process.
There you go, Jimmy.
Stole it from him.
Yeah, it's so RCOs engage their recovery communities in a participatory process where they're able to really find out what the need is. And so that could be one of the questions that the community answers. How we get to you. How do we get to you? Do you need transportation? And that could be something that the recovery community organization looks at possibly providing. Nobody wants to come into a neighborhood, kick down a door and say, we're here to help you and this is what we're offering, when nobody takes advantage of that. And then the organization says, okay, well, why is this programming or why is this failing? Well, you didn't ask the community what they wanted, what they needed, and how to best meet them where they're at.
Taking a needs assessment. A lot of communities, if you're interested in learning about the needs, they have community gatherings where they talk about them. Whether it's neighborhood watch, things like that. Just you can call a local church, and they should have information about when the next group gathering is to talk about the needs of the neighborhood. And I love that you brought that up, a needs assessment, because no one wants to be told what to do in a situation like that.
Yeah. Absolutely right. It's the
underwater basket weaving. We love Michigan. That's where my parents are from, and I have a lot of family up in Michigan. I hope you're staying safe and well.
Got some Vegas peeps out there. There's a recovery community, or a few different recovery community organizations out there in Vegas. Foundations for Recovery, as well as I believe there is no Hero and Heroin. Yes, they're rocking some RCOs out there.
Okay, so that brings a question to my mind. What's your viewpoint on multiple RCOs in the same city, especially if it's not a city as big as Vegas or Oklahoma City, somewhere like Little Rock? What's your viewpoint? Because I think how many people we got, Chris? Like 150,000 or something?
No, it's up to like 200,000.
200,000 people.
Just in the city limits of Little Rock, though. If you it's a lot higher with adjacent counties.
Right, because APAC, the Arkansas Peer Advisory Committee, they're advocating hard for us to get our RCOs up and running. And so I'm just curious, can you have too many in a city? Is it overkill at any point?
I don't think so. Here in Austin, we have a couple, and I think it's, if we talk about best business practices and also too just better human practices, it involves having strong relationships and ties with people that have similar missions and similar fights and challenges. So here in Austin, we work really close with the RCOs work really close with each other, keeping each other informed of, hey, we're thinking about doing this. Are you doing that? Do you want to do this together? Coordinating the events so that they're not planning on top of each other and not really competing. Because you know what? It's sad to say, but addiction isn't going anywhere, right?
No.
And why are we competing for helping others? There cannot be enough help out there.
Egos get in the way.
Silos.
That's what it is. Yep.
One of the things that our organization's philosophy is based on is we'd love to work ourselves out of this. I mean, we'd love to get out of this business by helping everybody. But we also are not naive enough to know, like what you said, addiction's not going away. It's multi-level, and it's a continuous thing. And so we've got to be ready as our world evolves and changes. We've got a treatment and resources and support systems must continue to evolve to meet the demand. Ginger Biss says our community goes old school and writes cards and letters to old timers. Let me say this. My handwriting is horrible, but I still love the handwritten card, and I do it, and I'll prove it. I've got my little cards right here.
My husband writes all the Christmas cards. I'm not allowed to write because
chicken scratch.
Yep, it is chicken scratch.
Mine is too. Mine looks like it's a letter to Santa written by a 4-year-old, but I still do it, and hopefully they can decipher what I'm saying. But I'm a big fan of handwritten notes.
I wanna jump back on the silos and the egos real quick, because our drug director Kirk Lane, says something. Well, Chris and I probably heard him say it a number of times, but a lot of people watching may need to hear it. And that you can do a lot of good when you don't care who gets the credit for it. Right. And so everything, these silos and the egos where we're competing for the same money and we're competing to help people, that goes back to that. I want that credit,
Yeah. I love the credit.
Yeah. Me too. It feels good.
I ran in this little race right here.
I got a question, Chris.
I wanted credit for that.
Do you ever put that rubber ducky in the bathtub?
No.
Even with the wood floats, right?
Just float.
Yeah. Right. So, Joseph, real quick, because we're down to like the last 12 minutes, so I got one question for you. MAT, one of the most known, talked about subjects in treatment, prevention, and recovery right now, right? Like we're all in agreement that, MAT, it gets stigmatized by people in the recovery community, by people not in the recovery community. But if I were a parent, and I actually got this perception from my wife, and I am a parent, and so if my child was on, would I want my child to be on MAT instead of an overdose victim? You know what I mean? And so that's the way my perception was shifted. I would want my child alive, even if it was on Suboxone or Subutex or whatever. And so what is the difference, though, between MAT, medically assisted treatment, and MAR, medically assisted recovery?
I think it's in a simple form, I would say medication assisted treatment. At least back in the day, treatment was, receiving your medication and the clinical services. With medication assisted recovery support or medication assisted recovery, you have more wraparound with that. So it's more of kind of a pathway as well. So if we're talking about peer recovery support services, peer recovery support services aren't necessarily treatment or clinical services.
Right.
Those are life skills. Those are, just job skills, navigating healthcare systems. If you're on any types of medication, how to make sure that you refill your medication, and going to doctor's appointments. So with medication-assisted recovery, it's not just the clinical component, not just the processing of past issues or past trauma with a clinician or a counselor or therapist, or just receiving your medication. It's the recovery component that addresses kind of the other changes in that happen in recovery, right? How we process, how we engage, how we, a whole bunch of different aspects of that. So treatment more speaks to medication-assisted treatment, kind of speaks to that more clinical aspect, although, and this differs from treatment provider to treatment provider, what all is included in that treatment, right?
So medication-assisted treatment usually deals with 3 different types of medication. You have methadone, buprenorphine, and naltrexone, which is the non-narcotic. And so that's what we're talking about. And so I think and tell me if you agree or disagree, Joseph and Jimmy. I think where methadone clinics got it wrong was it was just using the medication. There was nothing else in addition to showing up daily and getting the med and then leaving. There wasn't really any, what you were referring to as recovery support wraparound services. And so I think that the medication is just an arm of the whole body of things that need to be happening. I can't operate by just my arm. I've got to have my legs and everything else, and of course my heart and my brain. But medication-assisted treatment and abstinence-based models should be coexisting. I mean, we're far beyond separating people and doing that. I mean, I know that still happens a lot, but it should be under the same roof. I mean,
and kind of reflecting back to our conversation around fear. I mean, we are passionate about our experience and what has helped us and the people that are around us. So if we're traveling in 12-step circles, of course, we're going to hear that language, that message, those experiences. But if we don't, if we don't have any kind of reference as it pertains to medication-assisted treatment or recovery, then it's different from us, and so it could rub us the wrong way. And so there's absolutely space for different pathways of recovery. We may not be familiar with it, but I think it has changed over time. Because things are different. The approach is different. Like you had mentioned, Chris, medication-assisted treatment used to be, get your dose and that was it. But as we have evolved over time, services have evolved over time. Yeah. I see a comment that someone who works with MAT, they have those wraparound. It's not just the medication. It's not just seeing the clinician, but also getting support around any mental health and also receiving peer recovery support services.
Absolutely. So Sarah, I'm glad that you brought up the fact that your clinic where you receive methadone does provide counseling. That's important. With the point that we're making is medication isn't going to give the transformational change needed for longevity and recovery alone. It's going to take some more things than just that.
So can one of y'all, Jennifer Schuler, who is our medical lead for the state of Arkansas, you guys know Jen, I love her to death. She's also a huge advocate for people in recovery and especially the peer movement. She says Mars, to my knowledge, is copyrighted and cannot be widely used. Can you speak to that, Joseph? Is that accurate?
Yeah, Mars, the name Mars is actually an organization and have done some excellent work around including peers in a medication-assisted recovery dynamic. So their name is is Mars. But again, when we start talking about including recovery supports into medication-assisted anything, treatment,
it becomes recovery oriented.
Yeah. And quite honestly, if we start thinking about any organization providing services being recovery oriented, using a participatory process, really listening and gaining feedback from those that are receiving services, then we start creating organizations that are taking a trauma-informed approach to providing services, a recovery-oriented approach. So it's not just for those receiving services, but it starts to transform the organization. So those providing services also start to look at their own mental health, their own self-care. In this field, social workers and treatment providers experience burnout, and compassion fatigue. And if our organizations as providers start taking a recovery-oriented approach, we start checking in and we start self-advocating for time off, especially during this time. I reach out to a lot of organizations and a lot of friends and say, how are you doing? How is your health, overall health? Because this is tough times. They've been on the front lines and now they're stuck in their, in a room in their apartment or whatnot. And so really that is a huge traumatic shift. So how are we advocating to kind of step back and say, hey, I need a mental health day, or, hey, I need to talk to somebody. So really holistically as an organization, as service providers, taking recovery oriented approaches into not only service delivery, but also organizationally and for that participant as well.
So you bring up a great point. Like, we're focused on spending all of our energy helping. Hopefully, if you're in the treatment industry, you have a helping nature. You have a desire to help someone. You're not in there to just take. And so we were having a staff meeting the other day, and our mental health therapist was like, hey, I don't care if you're a client, staff, whoever, my office is open if you need to talk. And so I love that as a staff member of the organization, we can go and, meet with our mental health therapist. And, that's what we're doing. I mean, that's what I love about the environment that we have here, is that the atmosphere is one that is open, and we take care of one another. And that's what it's going to take, because burnout does exist. I mean, that's a reality. If I'm not taking care of me, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, that, I had a confrontation with a family member, and part of that was because I was building up this pressure and this volcano erupted. And so I wasn't focusing on the things that I needed to. And so we've heard I can't transmit something I don't have. I can't help somebody with if I'm, in a lot of turmoil myself. And so, you're one of the other things that I wanted to touch on was the fact that MAT is something that is still widely misunderstood. I was at a conference not too long ago, and a recovery conference, had a shirt that said Suboxone, it's just diet heroin. And so we still have a long way to go to end some stigma related towards this pathway. It's unfortunate that a lot of that stigma originates in the 12-step community. It's actually, it angers me, quite frankly, that we talk about, recovery being all inclusive, but then we judge and condemn others for the way they need help. And I love what Jimmy said. I mean, you can't recover if you're dead. Fentanyl has changed the game. I just said goodbye to a friend this past weekend. We put him in the ground because he had an accidental overdose. He did not. He wanted to live. He had plans for his future, and was not able to get there because fentanyl robbed him of that. And so I encourage, if you do have some strong emotions or feelings towards MAT as a pathway, to allow someone else to do their own thing. I mean, I'm an abstinence-based person. I mean, I don't use any mood-altering chemicals. I think that's the goal. I don't think MAT is meant to be, 20 years down the road, I'm still taking it. I think it's a tool to allow time for the miracle of recovery to happen, right?
And I think that, that's definitely a perspective that we see a lot often, and that's more evolved. And I know folks that, because some medication like methadone was designed to be on lifelong, what that looks like for them. And that has definitely transformed their life. Yeah. And so what we start to dive into is, that stigma and those preconceived notions or those perceptions. And one of the things that I'd like to, think about is why I'm resistant. And again, when I boil it down, it's usually some type of fear. And why am I afraid? And bottom line, how can I help? So meeting people where they're at, wherever in their life process and in thought process, how can I help? How can I be supportive?
That's what I was going to say. You were talking about a theory by a famous psychologist that I love, Carl Rogers. Person-centered approach. If we're going to do a needs assessment on a community that's looking at a RCO, we should be doing a needs assessment on a person that's seeking help, because each person's different, and you can't just apply a treatment model in a blanket concept. You can't force someone into a program. You've got to take the needs, develop the solution, and then let them go through the process.
Yeah. So sadly, guys, I hate to make everybody mad and cut the convo off, but we are out of time. We're actually over. Joseph.
Yes.
What would you like to leave the viewers with today?
Hope. I hope that you're doing well, that you're taking care of yourself, of your community, and reaching out when you need it, and reaching out when you don't think you need it, and just staying safe. I also have hope that through this time of national pandemic, that we grow closer together as a community and start to become even more resilient as a people. And I hope that you have a nice day.
Awesome. And so, Chris, did you have something?
Yeah, Joseph, thank you so much for spending some time with us today, and to let the world know who you are and how you are making positive ripples to bring hope to other people and inspire them to be a better person. I thank you. For everyone that's watching, I mean, I wish I could hug you two here. I wish I could hug everybody. I'm exhausted over this. Like, I'm ready to break out of the house, like Jimmy said, and just start dealing in hugs. And I just love everybody and hope to connect soon face to face.
Yeah. And so I want to leave you guys with this. Thank you, Chris and Joseph, for sure. I love you guys so much. If something was said today that triggered some emotions, or you started reliving some old feelings, before you act on those in a negative way, please message the recovery clinic and let us help you get to a better headspace. We don't do anything treatment wise. All we do is recovery, which is completely non-clinical, but we are a resource hub and we can connect you with mental health recovery. We can get you connected to substance abuse recovery or misuse recovery. Anything you need, let us help you get that recovery resource. And so Joseph and Chris, if you guys will hang on and stay tuned as we end, I will be with you in 1 second.
All right.